Sorry about that, everybody. Technical difficulties. I was trying a new thing with my setup and it wasn't picking up the audio. So we're back now. You guys should be able to hear everything we say. And this is an episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I'm your host and moderator, Cypher. And today I am joined by Chase Mitchell.
Hi, everybody.
Mateo DeGaulle.
Hey, what's up?
And joining us for the first time in the program is Travis Scott.
How's it going?
If this is your first time joining the News Roundup, we do this every week, Thursdays, starting at about 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we cover the week's news from the Thursday before to the current Thursday. We do this because we thought it was a great way to interact with our community in a live fashion and be able to get answers to people that want. So anyways, so that's what we do. We also typically have two podcasts released on iTunes, Spotify, and everywhere else you can get your podcast at twice a month to cover a variety of topics from MMT all the way to the Libyan civil war. So before we get into tonight's show, I'd like to let Travis Scott introduce himself to y'all, because I'm sure that people would like to know who you are and what kind of things you do.
All right. Travis Scott here, as I jokingly refer to these days as the real Travis Scott. Born and originally from Texas, but grew up most of my life in Maryland. Currently reside in Fargo, North Dakota. Job moved me out here. I'm currently a cloud representative at Microsoft on the Azure team. Been in that role for about 2 years, been with the company for about 7. And in addition to that, I am a reservist in the Navy. Just got back from deployment, so currently enjoying being back in the States. So that's about everything I could think of.
And Travis, what is it about politics and discussing like current events and stuff that you're like super interested in? What brings you to us and that sort of thing, if you don't mind?
So I've been in the sort of groups that you put together, Anthony, for a few years now. Actually, I was in this group before I even moved to Fargo. I'm a bit of a political buff. I always find politics and civics interesting, mainly because I also love history. And so a lot of politics and a lot of how the discourse and civility works it's basically history in real time. So kind of talking about events and things as they unfold has always been interesting to me. It's always, especially after these past elections, trying to get other perspectives, whether they're domestic and international, has always been of major interest to me as well. So that's basically what drew me to this group. All
right. That's a fair thing. That's why I like running little political debate communities, or have been doing it for a while now. Specifically, is there any like political issue that you find to be your number one top priority?
That's my top priority.
Besides the correct way to order a quarter pounder.
the most important stuff, right? You have to cover your bases. You know what? I will say, especially since my job basically revolves around it. Data and how basically we regulate it, we make sense of it, and how we use it. That's sort of a major issue that I think is ignored, because historically government has always lagged behind when it comes to understanding emergent technology. And data is essentially the oil of the 21st century. A number of politicians have uttered that phrase, but it's exactly true, because if you think about the largest and fastest growing companies internationally, whether you're talking about Amazon, Google, Alibaba, the major reason why they grew so fast is data. But at the same time, because we weren't aware of how important information, just the intrinsic information that we put in these different platforms, whether it's Facebook, Google, or just simply the apps that you use to go about your day, your banking apps, things like that. When you think about how all of these coalesce and how they can allow basically anyone to know things about you without you ever really directly informing them about information about you, and then making a large profit in which you play no part in, I feel like that is something that we definitely need to look into, especially when it comes to the issue of data protection and then also data sovereignty.
I mean, it's a very important topic, and we should probably do a entire episode about that. So if we end up doing that, and that's something you want to join in on, you're more than welcome to, and I'll hit you up when we try to cover it. Absolutely. So thank you again. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but thank you again for joining us tonight. So let's go ahead and get into the news. We have a variety of topics we should be covering tonight. We have some SCOTUS decisions or cases that they'll be hearing in the cycle that are very important. We have the ever evolving COVID situation globally. While the United States seems to be handling it better than previously, it is resurging in places like India. We have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict still ongoing with some developments there, and some news of the weird with some UFOs. So what kind of topic do you guys want to talk about first? I'm pretty much, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm pretty easy.
I mean, they're all so optimistic and positive. It's hard to
That's very true. That's very true. I think probably one of the topics that I think we should probably cover first, since doesn't seem to be any takers right now, is probably some of the Supreme Court cases that are coming up. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the abortion case coming out of Texas. There is, what else is the other one? Sorry, I need to double check. There's a couple of them. So yeah, what kind of things there? We got the 7-1 rule, 7-1, and that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals erred in decision that it lacked jurisdiction to consider certain grounds from the companies for bringing a case into federal court. This is in regards to the oil companies in Baltimore. So yeah, which ones, guys?
I like to say there's a number of them. It's kind of interesting if you look at the Supreme Court as a whole, when you look at the expectation of how the verdicts were supposed to land. Even though the Supreme Court is now 6-4 or 6-3, 6-3.
6-3.
Yeah, now since the Supreme Court is 6-3, if you look at these past verdicts, they've essentially been more or less the same back when the balance of the court was 5-4 with these past years. Everyone thinking that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch were going to be solidly on the right. For a number of cases in the past, they've actually continued to have verdicts more toward the center, and even in some cases in the left. Another interesting thing is past decisions. Probably the biggest and most controversial thing that you could point out in the Supreme Court that has happened is the whole concept of my butcher the Latin, but stare decisis, like the whole of when there's a past ruling that is precedent, and when you read and when you govern and make verdicts, you always want to use the past as precedent. And there were a number of court cases that had come into play that essentially in some cases did away with that. So for example, with the topic of execution, 2 states, Utah and there's another state, is it Mississippi? But anyway, two states actually have what's called and you don't have to have a unanimous jury to issue a verdict, even in the case of a murder charge. And there was a previous Supreme Court case that basically struck that down in terms of whether or not you can issue a verdict without a unanimous jury. However, there was a recent court case that was basically, they had lost by the Supreme Court, where they were trying to retroactively remove someone from death row because of the fact that his sentence his verdict was done by a jury that wasn't unanimous. However, in this recent Supreme Court case, in which Gorsuch ended up being the tie-breaking vote, it basically ruled that no, you can't apply that to past cases. So that's sort of a big deal, because at first it was supposed to be a major win in terms of criminal justice reform, because there was a number of death penalties that were issued in these two states as a result of non-unanimous juries, and those will still go forward, even though the Supreme Court prior to this had already struck down non-unanimous jury verdicts.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the court in general and you're talking about looking at where it's at, I think that a lot of people assumed, to your point, that having a 6-3 court would instantly turn it into a, conservative nightmare. And I think that this just points to the reality that we've been lying to ourselves about all along, that the Supreme Court is a political institution. We like to think of it as a purely judicial one, but it's just not. And the people on the Supreme Court recognize it as a political institution and recognize that if they just come in and start to undo everything that was done in the past, it's not going to look good politically. It's going to hurt the long-term efforts of the people who are, politically aligned with them. And there's also, you bring up Gorsuch, who I think is very interesting, because Gorsuch actually has brought a unique Western U.S. perspective to the Supreme Court that was kind of missing. So he had, when he was at the appellate level, overseen a bunch of cases with indigenous issues. So he actually has a better understanding of indigenous issues, and some of us might remember the Oklahoma case that happened. Boy, time is meaningless nowadays, so I have no idea when it happened, but it happened sometime.
Yeah, yes.
And Gorsuch ended up basically writing this opinion that said, reinforcing a whole bunch of indigenous rights that people hadn't thought about or talked about, and certainly the Supreme Court hadn't decided on in a long time. I mean, it was absolutely enormous. I think we're about to find out, with these cases coming up, the extent to which these individuals really care about the concept of precedent. Stare decisis, as you brought up, Travis, is, we've got hundreds of years of jurisprudence, all of these cases and case law that build up what we accept as the law today. And I always hear from these, constitutional textual readers who say, well, we just need to look at the Constitution. Well, you know what? The Constitution doesn't actually say anything about abortion. So people have to interpret the Constitution. You can interpret it a number of ways. But when Kavanaugh was going through his confirmation hearing, he said that Roe v. Wade was, precedent. And then I forget what the follow-up case to Roe v. Wade was, but that was precedent on top of precedent. So now we're about to find out if people like Kavanaugh are actually going to be true to his word and recognize that precedent, or if they're willing to spend political capital to advance some of these issues that are about to come before the court, because that is what they would do. They would be spending political capital in order to advance that thing. But we should take this seriously, especially with the abortion issues coming up, because there are multiple counties in the U.S. There's at least one that has effectively outlawed abortion. That will surely make it to the Supreme Court. There's this one that I think, is that Lubbock? I forget. But the Mississippi one is a 15-week ban, which goes against Roe v. Wade, which I believe said, well, there's a couple different precedents there, but it goes against the current precedents that's out there because it's just too early. And I'm just curious as to what's going to happen. I honestly don't know. I mean, we know what Amy Coney Barrett's going to do, but like Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, I don't know how to read it, those people, to be honest, on issues like this where there's so much precedent coming up. It's going to be really interesting to see.
I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I think we know how Alito, Thomas, and Barrett is going to rule on.
Yeah, because they don't care.
Right.
My impression.
Right.
But I am curious, and Roberts really cares about the what's the
right? He cares about the legitimacy of the court.
Yeah, he cares about the legitimacy
as a non-political institution.
Yeah, that's
he's in denial.
Yeah, he's a bit. I do take that point. I do agree that he's in a little bit of denial about this. So it is going to come down to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and I believe both of them are pretty staunchly Catholic, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm not entirely sure where they're going to fall on that, because they're both conservative Catholics at that. So they both think that these were wrong rulings personally. But with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, they are very much more on the Roberts side of it, where it comes to stare decisis, where precedent matters. And so they're going to do this. They might approach the line. Right. So the actual, it's not a set in stone viability standard. The viability standard was kind of like medically at the time determined. So they could approach it that way, still keeping relying on precedent, but chipping away about when abortion can happen. And that's how I personally see the court ruling in this, is that they might say, fit too soon, but maybe we can get it. Maybe they'll stop it after 18 weeks. Like I could definitely see that doing it, where they stop it at the fourth, like, you're 20 weeks in, you're on your fourth, fifth month, no more abortion. Like I could definitely see that going in that route. So,
and I think that we should, if we're talking about, this is a hard topic to talk about because it's an emotional one. And when people talk about it, they usually aren't making, you aren't talking about it in a vacuum. 1 in 4 women in the United States has had an abortion, so they're personally connected to it. And there are a lot of people who passionately, fervently believe that abortion is murder. And I may not agree with that emotional assessment, but I want to acknowledge that a lot of that feeling is based in misinformation about when abortions occur and why they occur and when they occur, and also about viability of fetuses and what fetuses are and what even their experience or lack of experience of life is. There's just a ton of misinformation out there about abortion. Like, we think that there's a lot of misinformation out there about COVID right now. I mean, these guys this is well-trodden ground, decades rich. And I don't know how we ever overcome it, unfortunately. Right. But, if the Supreme Court decides to really dig into Roe v. Wade and really take a stab at bringing it down a peg, you're going to see more women dying, more people who are getting abortions, in trying to do it at their home or doing it underground without medical supervision. You're going to see higher levels of child poverty because children are going to be born into families that don't want them and can't afford them. And these are not outcomes that anybody wants, but all of that nuance is lost in this conversation because there's just an emotional, not fact-based reality when you're talking about this topic that is driving all of these state laws.
We do have a comment coming from Afro Del Riviere saying it's really important that someone talk about this, and would like to thank you personally, Chase, for bringing these issues up. So that's always good to know.
I also have a personal vendetta because I used to work at an arcade, and the abortion people would park a fetus van right in front of the arcade, and I'm like, come on, people are just coming here to play DDR.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I do wonder how this is going to play out as well beyond just the court, but we saw in the 2020 primary where several Democratic candidates brought up the need to cement the right to abortion in law. And of all the candidates, Joe Biden was probably not the most wishy-washy, but the most hesitant to make a firm.
Yes.
The most Catholic. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The most Catholic in his response about, not necessarily wanting it to be constitutional, but then actually coming around to it and that sort of thing. And this throws a wrench into that whole thing, because if the court comes in and says if the court rules in this instance that 15-week abortion bans are legal, states throughout the entire South and Bible Belt are going to just pass 15-week abortion bans like in a day. They'll already have the laws written up. They'll already have it passed, and they'll already have it like scheduled to pass in the legislature, and it'll go to the governor's desk, and it will be done in like 2 or 3 days tops. 3 days tops. So it'll be law in like 28, 29 states minimum. So I'm curious how this might play out in that regard. What are your guys' thoughts? Mateo, you've been quiet about the topic for a little bit. What are you thinking, man?
I mean, like 29, 30 states, that's like how many had anti-abortion laws during the time of Roe. I don't think it'd be that bad these days. I mean, maybe. I don't know, like, because you're seeing the states that these laws are coming from. I mean, is this even really to decide all of Roe? Or is it just no?
So this particular case in question isn't going to overturn Roe. It is going to rule on the legal litmus test of whether or not a 15-week abortion ban is within Roe. And the other case, it starts with a G. I'm just terrible with names, but the one that determined the viability test. And so you'll see if the court rules in favor of this law, in favor of Mississippi. Was it Mississippi? I think it was Mississippi. Yeah. In favor of this, then you'll see a lot of states move to pass these things. And from the Midwest, the Bible Belt, so anywhere between Texas and basically Indiana.
They're not going to just outright ban all abortion, because
they'll pass. So if this
case
just be
like
ruled,
the time limit will just be narrowed down.
It'll be a heck a lot more than what it is now. We're talking like eight weeks.
Yeah, no, it's pretty
different. It's very restrictive. So like you're talking, let's say most women don't realize they're pregnant for a month, maybe 2. So you're talking like 2 or 3 weeks to make a decision in a lot of these cases. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if everyone accepted viability before, and they defended Roe almost to the death, and if they could prove that this is within the realm of viability, I don't see why anyone would really be too upset with it unless they didn't care about that at all to begin with.
No, they don't.
That's what I'm saying.
These are like fetal heartbeat bills.
Yes.
These are like fetal heartbeat bills. These are like fetal pain bills. These are like if you cause pain, you can't do it, right? These are moral questions about
if something's capable of feeling pain. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's an easy don't do it from us, but politics might change that for a lot of us. It's kind of like I don't think that's really what these are going to be, though. I think this is just viability, whatever the fuck that means. Like, I guess if you remove it, can they keep it alive in a machine? Is that what they're saying?
I mean, that's the problem. Is as science continues to advance, viability is going to get earlier and earlier and earlier to the point where viability may soon be at the point of conception. So if viability is the metric, and we can literally take a fertilized egg and sperm and put it in a vat and make a baby out of it, does that mean that is a miscarriage manslaughter? Like what? Because you could have taken it out of you and put it in the vat and not miscarried. This is the slippery.
It's not necessarily manslaughter.
I'm going to make the slippery slope argument that the right always loves to make, is that if we start eroding this, we're on a slippery slope to some weird moral consistency problems, 10, 20 years down the road.
And then we'll be marrying frogs.
And it'll be gay marriage because the chemicals are making the frogs gay.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but states also tend, at least what I've seen from conservative states, is they tend to also try to ride on the momentum of these court cases. So Mississippi is I guess they were looking at a 15-week ban. The one going on in Texas is 6 weeks, right?
Yep.
That's the latest one there. And you already had states that kind of, well, we can't outright ban abortion, but we're going to just make it extremely difficult to have an abortion. Like, just come up with goofy regulations where the walls need to be 12 by 11 when they know that most clinics, the corridors are much wider or thinner or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Therefore, a facility with all of the capable resources that they would need to offer that as a service can't do it because they don't meet these arbitrary regulations that passed. There was a Supreme Court case on that, and I think they had struck those regulations down. But it's just an example of what sort of happens from these things. And then to parallel with that, voting rights. I mean, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was weakened way back in, I want to say 2009. And
it was just at the start of the Obama administration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roberts basically said, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it was if I'm not mistaken, it was
great.
Clarence Thomas of all people that was essentially the tie-breaking vote, which complete irony there, especially when you look at the whole saga of how he got confirmed. But anyway, immediately after that, that's when the beginning of these voter suppression laws started to manifest, and a lot of the DOJ under Eric Holder's administration was just suing state after state after state after state after state that would pass these things, and we're sort of seeing a reemergence of that now.
I want to give a special shout out to President Joe Biden for really doing everything he could to get that Supreme Court justice nomination through, even though Clarence Thomas is a horrible person.
Yes.
I didn't know about all the details of that case until Joe Biden was running for president, and oh my God, it's bad.
Yeah.
I did want to follow up on the pain question. I did some spot research because this isn't the area where I'm a subject matter expert, but the Journal of the American Medical Association has a synthesis report bringing together a bunch of things that evidence, I'm going to just quote here, evidence regarding the capacity for fetal pain is limited, but indicates that fetal perception of pain is unlikely before the third trimester. And the third trimester begins at 27 to 28 weeks from
So then we could all agree on it. Like if a Republican puts that forward, just be like, sure.
Well, but here's the problem.
I'll get some
many of these laws. So late term abortions, like third trimester abortions, shockingly rare. It's like less than 1% of abortions, right? And they happen when it's like the mother might die, the mother and the baby might die, or basically the baby's going to die no matter what.
Yeah.
And the mother's going to give birth to a stillborn child. Like those are the most common. That's like, so of the less than 1% of abortions that are late term abortions, 99% of them are those cases. And Republicans still say, no, we don't want any abortion, even in those situations where the mother might die or where the mother's going to be forced to give birth to a stillborn child. So like, everyone can agree.
I don't think that's Republicans. That's like a sect of Republicans.
I mean, it is the apparent position of the Republican Party.
At least the ones that wield the most influence electorally, aka the evangelicals. I guess that's because pretty much there is no way you are surviving any sort of Republican contest without
They're saying
securing
no abortion for no reason.
Well,
I mean, there have been laws passed that were attempting
there have been.
to
Oh yeah,
make
I'm not saying
abortion
these people are
illegal, even in the case of incest and rape.
Sure,
like,
I'm aware of those people. I just don't know how mainstream Republican they are. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just I don't have anything.
I think you're not necessarily wrong. You just have a different Republican that exists in the Northeast versus what exists in the Midwest.
Well, it's either wrong or right.
That may be true.
Or more specifically, the South, the SEC corridor is what we call it, because that's mainly the ones when you look at states that.
Okay, we're talking about we're talking don't take these statistics as gospel, right? I'm using them as a point of clarity here. We're talking anywhere between 20 and 35% of staunch primary Republican voters that are the evangelical bloc. And if you can't win those people over, you are going to lose a primary.
To more
Sure.
So here's
to say vote Republicans, to generalize that across the whole party is kind of like
you're right. That's an unfair thing to do.
Thank you.
But a consistent talking point at the national level of the Republican Party on this topic has been that Democrats want to allow people to kill babies, including third trimester abortions.
When they're
third trimester abortions are like not a problem in the United States of America. People who are pregnant at that point don't want to give up their kid. Like they are in an impossible situation, and then people are passing laws that takes their impossible situation and makes it double impossible, as if it wasn't even, as if it's like incomprehensible, taking these families who are at the worst point of their lives and giving them the middle finger and saying, fuck you, we're passing a law that's going to limit your options. And that has happened. And it's because it's politically advantageous for the Republican Party to do so. Are there tons of laws out there doing this? Is it actively something that they're trying to do? No. In fact, if abortion becomes 100% illegal in the United States, it would be one of the worst things to happen to the Republican Party politically, because then they can't beat Democrats over the head with it like a shovel every single year.
And it's also, I would say it's not politically advantageous. Maybe it was a while ago, but these days, I feel like most Americans, regular Americans, they're not going to be like, yeah, we should get rid of that abortion, unless you keep it vague, like when Republicans fearmonger. Like they'll just say, killing babies. They'll never specify the shit that they mean. They're all in the room together.
They'll be like, oh, well, like they want to ban the barbaric practice.
But I think most people, when you really get down and explain it to them, I think most people fall somewhere like you're
right.
With Rome. Yeah. But I wanted to ask about this case though. Are they going to decide what is viability? Is this what they're deciding that, or are they just going to get rid of that altogether? Like that's not a
we don't know yet. So right now, this particular case is hearing whether or not the 15-week ban, 15 any more than 15 weeks you can't get an abortion. So 15-week ban, whether or not that is going to meet the standard that is currently set. So if they say it meets the standard that is currently set, then they're essentially getting rid of the viability standard, right? Because viability, for all intents and purposes, I think Afra put it in chat, so I'll just look for it again. I think she said it was 24 weeks, 22 weeks. If I can find it.
I guess
24 to 25 weeks. So, so if they say that, they're basically getting rid of the viability standard. So that's why we're talking about it.
I guess the layman's way to put it is whether or not this 15-week, whether or not it is, you could feasibly ban abortion past 15-week, but then if that is viable, no pun intended, how low can you go, essentially? Because again, Texas already has a boilerplate 6 week ban ready to go. So that's one thing you got to take into account as well.
Which, by the way, many women don't even know they're pregnant at that point.
Yep.
Right.
And Afra brings up a great point that if they decide based on undue burden instead of viability, it gets rid of the standard. So if this is an undue burden restriction to abortion and they rule it in that case and get rid of the 15-week, then the standard is eliminated. So I think that's where she was going with that. If not, Afra, go ahead and chat in like 20 seconds or so. Let us know.
and again, I'm not trying, because actually Mateo brought up a really good point, and you're super right about this. When I talk to the average Republican voter who says that they are pro-life and actually ask them about their beliefs on abortion, most of them are pro-choice in that they believe that women should have some access to abortion, which is what pro-choice means.
Yep.
And they just have bought into the misinformation about what pro-choice means and what the Democrats are actually like trying to preserve, which is the right for women to make their choice and for, families, when they're in those impossible situations, to be able to make the best decision for them.
And in fairness to what Mateo was saying, with
well, you're right. Like, you're not wrong.
Exactly. With the characterization of the Republican Party, it's unfortunate that they've become caricatured by the people that make the smallest group among them. It's just the smallest group as far as their political structure. They're the loudest people in the room and wield the most power. You could get away with, if you can't win over the Republicans and the West Coast, Northeast Coast, but you just lock down the South, you're good to go.
Yeah.
And just to be blunt, who votes in primaries?
Exactly.
Yes.
And you can't make this, like, people try to make the same analogy with the left and saying the left has loudest voices dominate political space, but that's just not how it's set up in the Democratic Party.
Right.
It's almost like the left in the Democratic Party they're really loud, but they actually represent their small constituency, whereas in the Republican Party they're really loud and they hold a lot more power in there as well. So
yeah, and there is, I mean, in these very liberal cities, leftist cities, we have seen representatives get further to the left, but it's not the same as MTG and
right.
the gang.
I forget her name now. She's only taking interviews from brown and black reporters now?
You're talking about Lori Lightfoot from.
That's it, Lightfoot. Yeah, I always forget her name.
God, everyone I know in Chicago hates
progressive. Her. And that's not even Maxine Waters' status. You guys got him too.
Everyone that I know in Chicago hates Lightfoot, especially everyone, because especially around the teachers union stuff that's happened.
Oh God, yeah.
Hang on, before we move on from this topic, there's one thing I have to say, and it's Stephen Breyer. For fuck's sake, please retire.
Fucking do it. No.
Get the hell out of there.
Jesus Christ.
Don't
he's looking like before he died, he's looking like Prince Philip status. Like he's getting up there.
I mean, Ginsburg, Queen, we love you, but you should have retired when Obama was there. Like, R.I.P. But seriously, like, that
was 1,000 years old then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Breyer is dragging. He needs to.
Yeah.
We have another. I think we've discussed this topic pretty extensively. I hope that we gave the topic justice from both our perspectives.
And to be fair,
a bunch of men discussing abortion.
We're a bunch of men.
The big fat elephant in the room. Thank you for acknowledging.
I would have said white, but tonight our guest has saved us from that criticism.
I have made a habit of just acknowledging, oh hey, we're a bunch of white presenting dudes, but now we're just dudes.
We're getting better. We're starting to get better.
But yeah, we normally Universal Discourse would join us, but she got caught up in a work thing, so that's why she's not here. Just FYI, she is a permanent member of the podcast, or at least of the News Roundup. So go ahead, get her content. She does really good work. She interviewed a very important author last week, or was it the week before? Either way, good stuff. Need to check it out. Great content. So I think we discussed this topic pretty extensively. There's a couple of more interesting, not necessarily court cases that are coming up, but like laws in regards to the death penalty. Have you guys managed to check this at all?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was it?
There's some states that are trying
South Carolina.
South Carolina is one of them. I want to say it's also Mississippi, but there's a couple of states that are going forward on executions that had been stayed for a better part of a decade, and looking for other ways to essentially put people to death. And one of the things here, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, South Carolina, essentially, so they're about to, well, actually, I believe the governor has signed it at this point.
I think they signed it, yep.
Yeah, basically that authorizes that you can be executed by firing squad in South Carolina. And the reason why they did this is because a number of states have struggled to obtain the necessary drugs that are used to carry out lethal injections. This is for several reasons, but the biggest one being because the manufacturers that make the drugs that are used to carry out lethal injections, many of them come from Europe, and Europe has decided to take the stance that we no longer want to be associated as that pharmaceutical company that makes those drugs that are designed to kill people. And we're just not going to make them, or we're not going to ship them, knowing that they're going to be used for that purpose. So as a result, that's the states have been looking for a way to still carry out executions in lieu of this. Some states were basically giving people the choice of, you want to wait around until we get the stuff we need to kill you by lethal injection, or you want to go ahead and take one out in the electric chair. It's been like that. And then I guess the conclusion that South Carolina came to is, hey, let's just bring back firing squads. And this sort of dovetails with what I pointed out earlier about the Supreme Court case involving jury by non-unanimous or verdicts by non-unanimous jury. Because if we're going to go ahead and restart the assembly line for executions, but there's still 2 states where you have a much larger margin of error in taking the life of someone who could potentially be innocent, which is still an issue in this country. And now you're saying, well, now we can have fire squads potentially execute potentially innocent people. It kind of playing with a powder keg here.
The fact that there's even a margin of error is exactly why I'm against the death penalty to begin
with. As am I.
It's like, I mean, that's so final. Like, there's a reason why there's a difference between criminal and civil law, because certain things you just don't want to get wrong to the point where you're like, it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
So when it comes to death, it's so final that there should be no, there's no way to reverse it, even though a lot of criminal decisions can't be reversed really, but we give them money and say it's better. But yeah,
there's no such thing as 100%.
Right.
Never be 100%.
Right.
As anti-death penalty as I am, if they're going to carry it out and the person voluntarily says, "Yeah, give me the firing squad," I'm less against that than I am just.
It is the most badass way to be executed.
I mean, did they give you a cigarette? Blindfold?
Now, one problem with these particular cases, though, is that in the law, they gave them the ability to choose either between, as Travis was saying, either between lethal injection or the electric chair. And so a lot of people are like, give me lethal injection. It's not torture. I'm going to die, hopefully, as painlessly as possible, or maybe not be conscious of it, or what have you. With the electric chair, it's a crapshoot, right? The fit couldn't be right. That's why there's some people that have caught literally on fire during it. Even with the more modern kind of electrocution systems, people have some have had organs rupture before dying. There's been tons of stuff. So as everybody I think on this panel will agree, it's essentially torture. And in these states, they're not giving them the option to choose. Really, they're basically they're saying they're trying to retroactively make them choose between the electric chair as the default or death by firing squad,
right?
Regardless of what the law was under when they had gotten the choice. So I don't know what we should think about that. Is this one of those situations where we should be like, well, they're at least giving them an option? I mean, it's a series of bad options. Is this a better one, or should we just really put pressure on the states to be like, don't execute anybody? Is that going to really happen?
Well,
like,
ideal,
what we start? Yeah, that ideally, right.
Well, not only that, but let's not forget the reason why the stay of executions occurred in the first place was because in Ohio, because of this struggle to get the necessary drugs, they didn't have the correct mixture when they executed a specific person. So basically this happens in 3 stages. The first one is supposed to make you feel numb. The second stage is supposed to essentially paralyze you. And then this third stage stops your heart. Apparently what happened in Ohio is while an execution was being carried out, either the first or second, process didn't kick in. So the part that would cause the most pain, where that's supposed to stop your heart, that kicked in, and they basically watched the person suffer for several hours. It traumatized the people that were observing the execution, and because of that, they hold the horses. We got to stay because that essentially violates the cruel and unusual punishment.
Because they had to confront the reality that they're killing somebody.
Yes.
What a concept.
And the thing is, more often than not, we don't know when that really happens because they're paralyzed.
Yes.
So they could be feeling it and just paralyzed. Actually, maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to.
No, you're yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's just not worth risking.
I mean, the whole conversation is ridiculous. Why are we allowing the state to kill people?
Yes.
Like, that is a nonsense. I don't care who you are. That is what you are advocating for.
Yes.
You're for the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
You are advocating for the state to be able to legally kill people. And that is a really scary thought to me. And like every moral system since the beginning of time, when you look at it, even Christians, they seem to love the death penalty for some reason. But when I think back, let me just Lord thy God, no vain, Sabbath Mother. Oh, thou shalt not kill. So, interesting. And I know that people make a differentiation, like, oh, it's not, it's really should be thou shalt not murder, and no, this isn't murder but how is it not? You're not actively defending yourself anymore. This is basically like the worst version of an eye for an eye. It's not restorative. Like, do families that had somebody killed feel better because the person that probably, we don't even know 100%, probably killed their family member is now dead? Does that make them feel better?
It's not worth it.
Probably not in most cases. They're still miserable. Maybe they're even more miserable because, now they feel like there's 2 deaths as a result of this horrible thing that happened to their family. There is absolutely no good part of this whatsoever. And like arguing about, this weird, like, is there justification to like change the law so that they can find a way to kill them and the prisoners can choose it? I'm sorry. I just can't engage in it other than to say it should never ever happen.
It is ludicrous.
I know you're trying to like bring it back to like what's happening in the news right now, but I cannot talk about this topic except for to say,
yes, it's ridiculous.
The death penalty.
Right.
No, I actually agree with you on that. I just, I want to be fair to what the other side might be thinking about this, even though I find it morally repugnant. I try to make it, and I'm not saying you don't do this as well. I'm just explaining my own position here. I try to understand what it is that they're getting at, right? And I was listening to NPR shortly before going live, and there was Republicans saying that we have denied justice to these victims' families for 10 years. And so we should be giving it, this should have been something that we solved 10 years ago, because we're not going through on what we've promised these people. We have a law. It says the death penalty is here. We've condemned these people to death. By not going through on that, they're perpetuating a fraud against their people. That's the terminology they used. And 2, you're denying justice to the family. I don't find this to be justice. 100% full stop. But I do think I understand kind of where they're coming from, because viscerally, if I saw somebody murdering, or if I found somebody had just murdered somebody, viscerally, my reaction is going to be like, I got to kill that motherfucker if there's a person very close to me. So I understand the point, but that's not what the society should do, right?
And I would argue you're never going to win on the moral argument of punishment. You're never going to win there. No. The Dukakis has proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Unfortunate. The fact that you can never be 100% correct is the best way to combat that. Is executing this one person who is guilty worth the potential for states to execute however many people who are innocent? If you are not okay at all with innocent people being executed,
right,
and we know that you will never have a 100% effective conviction that is correct, then you cannot support the death penalty. That's essentially the argument that has to be made. You're never going to win on the moral justification argument of punishment. You're just not.
Yeah, it's like, what do you want to err on? The innocent being, punished, or the guilty going free?
Right.
And I would rather accidentally let the guilty go free than the innocent get punished. Like, this is how they look at it when you bring up like the death penalty, because to them it's not even a thing about odds. It's basically a philosophical thing, and they rather not have one get over on them. It's almost, it seems like.
Right. And not only that, but we are still in a period. So there's a, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Angel Project, but it's a nonprofit that they basically work overturning prior death row convictions. And they still have a record of several thousand verdicts overturned that would have otherwise, had they not intervened, that person would have been put to death. So if they're still putting out numbers that high, obviously you have to get rid of it. You have to.
Yeah, I'm totally against it. It's so stupid. It's nothing but like vengeance. That's all it seems like.
I mean, Charles Manson, the hallmark serial killer of our era. He spent his entire life in prison, and it was perfectly fine. And as far as the people that actually, his cohorts that actually did the killing, they died in prison. They spent their entire lives in prison, and for the most part, his family was okay with it. Yeah, they had to put in the work of going to every freaking parole meeting for however many years to say, nah, we don't want you out. We don't think you've, actually learned your lesson. But that is a much better way to go than something that's just finite as just put you in front of a firing squad. It's just
definitely.
No, true. Yeah, I don't even think I can agree with the whole this. Yeah, I don't know. I can't say it any better than Travis did, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Is there anything else we should mention for this particular topic before we move on to another one? Okay.
I mean, since these are both court related, should we at least allude to the idea about stacking the Supreme Court and say that it's not going to happen?
More Republicans? Ooh, I don't know, man.
Yeah, that was pretty much died when Biden was the winner, right? I mean,
I don't even think Biden has anything to do with it. Like, it's.
I mean, I don't think he would. I don't. If it's
Manchin
dead.
And Kirsten Sinema would never.
Ever Manchin.
I was about to say I don't think it would.
Yeah, Manchin and Kirsten Sinema would more so be the obstacle, because there was one moment where Biden had spoken on the matter and pointed out that the number of justices that sat on the court isn't set in stone. So he could be politically pushed to adding or subtracting justices. He doesn't take a definitive position either way.
Right. No, I just meant that, like, I don't think Biden, even if it came to Biden's desk, I don't see him actually approving it. That's what I mean.
A lot of political capital for something that might not fucking pay out. I would be reluctant, especially when.
Sorry, go ahead, Mateo.
No, it's cool. I was just gonna ramble.
No, ramble away.
I want to know.
Well, that's the thing about rambling, is I didn't really have anything. I was going to just aimlessly talk.
If I had my ideal situation, it would be Supreme Court reform that makes it so that everybody gets, 2 per term or whatever. So it's just a consistent cycle. It's not a lifetime appointment. Unfortunately, that would require a constitutional amendment. In a hyper-polarized environment that we live in now, constitutional amendments are literally impossible.
Yeah.
So it's barely worth talking about, but it would be.
I don't even think we really need reform. Like, this is unfortunate. Well, depending on your views, what we have right now. But let's say Mitt Romney won in 2012. All this would be so different. We wouldn't even have had Trump. So, like, to say it's broken versus to say we got a lot of shitty hands dealt to us. I think that's really what the difference is here. I think the Supreme Court's fine. It's just someday it might even be super Democrat. And then what? The Republicans are going to say the same thing. They're just, we need reform. And they're not even going to say, like, this sucks for me. They're just going to be like, it has to be reform.
That's why I'm in favor of permanent solutions. And if you did a reform that made it so that every president got a consistent, like 1 per term or 2, 1 per term is probably the easiest, right?
That's one of the reasons. Yeah.
Every president gets 1 per term. Then you don't have these arguments, because it's whoever won the presidency, they get their appointment. That's it.
Do you think that there's not volatility in rulings, though?
That's one of the reasons why I think an 18-year 18-year term limit would make sense. An 18-year term limit would mean that every president that gets elected, you have 2 choices. Done.
Yeah.
Well, and it's absurd, honestly. I mean, you've got everyone on the right talking about term limits for politicians. Yeah. I don't want people sitting on the bench for 50 years. Like, you think that Stephen Breyer knows about TikTok? I'm sorry. Like, we've got problems there.
Yeah.
Like you said before, Travis, we shouldn't go down this rabbit hole, but let's be real. These people, especially the ones that have been there for decades, are not really in touch with what's going on.
We've seen this every time they bring out the big tech CEOs at a Senate hearing.
It's embarrassing.
They just look dumber and dumber and dumber. I just scream at the TV.
Do you have any idea where your ads are going, sir?
How do y'all make money? How does Facebook make money?
So Mr. Pachai, on my phone the other day, an article came up telling me that I'm a liar. And my granddaughter could have seen that. Why, Mr. Pachai, is this coming up on my phone?
The price of opera tickets are too high, and the American people cannot take it.
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with both Chase and Travis here with reform. I am more reform because of the ability for people to live to the age of 100 now, not because that I care that any particular court is stacked one way or the other. It makes with that much. With that ability to be on the court that
I just
long,
have a feeling we wouldn't be having this conversation if Hillary was stacking them all left. I don't think people are like, this is a problem.
Now you're probably right for most people or for most lay people, but I have always been of the mind that this is needed to be reformed. Not because
maybe okay,
yeah, just not because
I actually don't. I don't think that's true for me, but there are certain things that I stand against, kind of no matter what. I just think lifetime appointments are bad. I think that gerrymandering is bad. Yes. So, like in Wisconsin, like these are systemic things that I identify as like we need a permanent solution because otherwise we end up with bad outcomes. Like Supreme Court justices getting appointed for political reasons to serve for as long as humanly possible. That's bad outcome. Like, right? Gerrymandering leads to politicians who are totally unaccountable because they have chosen their voters rather than the other way around. In Wisconsin, my home state, shout out. The Democrats were in control up until 2010, and they had an opportunity in the aughts to establish a nonpartisan redistricting committee, and they chose not to because they were in power and they wanted to leverage their power in order to be able to district to their own advantage. Well, didn't work out for them. Bad idea, right? So I don't really like it's easy to say, oh, well, you're just saying this because of the situation. But at least for me, I try to be intellectually honest with myself. And I say, I want permanent solutions. When we talk about the minimum wage issue too, I say, hey, I'm less concerned about raising the minimum wage to $15 right now than indexing it to CPI or something else. That's a long-term solution that we have to be fighting about. Like, I'd rather they don't even raise it right now. Just tie it to CPI and leave it.
We'll raise it too. I mean, it's
not only that.
The buying power is eroded a lot.
My thing with my beef, these touched major issue with, but my beef with the left is they sometimes miss the forest through the trees or they miss focus. So on the topic of minimum wage, right?
Oh God, I did not mean to drag us down that rabbit hole.
I'll be quick. Quick. I promise.
Okay.
But if the goal is to get you at 15, is to get the majority of people at 15 an hour, you don't have to make the federal minimum wage at 15 an hour, because market forces push the wage floor to at least another $2-3 higher. Manchin was on board with raising the minimum wage to 11. You could have effectively gotten most of the country a little over halfway there, at least like $13-14 an hour, if you would just go ahead and just compromise with Manchin, got the federal level at 11 an hour, tied it to inflation, which is also what he wanted to do. So you satisfy what Chase wanted, and you throw in extra money, and then you let the market forces drive it up higher.
It wasn't
like
just that simple, though, because the parliamentarian ruled they couldn't include it in that bill. And it seems like Manchin et al. Weren't willing to either fire the parliamentarian or have Kamala supersede the parliamentarian. Then they would have
been bad precedent, though.
What's that?
I said it would have been bad precedent. I don't want to get down into the weeds of this.
I mean, to be fair, there's already, I mean, we don't know for sure. There's already precedent for fighting the parliamentarian.
Sure.
The George W. Bush administration did it. But like, I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's that they didn't settle for 11 because I think it's because the process didn't allow them to do it and they couldn't get
I can agree with that. So we should move on to our news of the weird segment for people that might just be tuning in just now or tuning in.
I already know what it is. I'm just preemptively mad.
We do this little funny news roundup, news of the weird segment in order to kind of basically break up our news segments and put a little bit of fun in there. In today's segment, we are going to talk about UFOs. The government has been releasing of UFO or supposed UFO sightings and footage over the last few weeks. This was something that was near and dear to Harry Reid's heart, and he was one of the people that founded a commission to study it at first, and now we're seeing more fruits of that labor, more people talking about it. So, UFOs, what about them?
Clintons too. I think Clintons were kind of always big on UFOs, or at least Hillary was, I think, right?
I will defer to the wise words of Elon Musk on Joe Rogan. If there are in fact aliens and UFOs, they are very subtle and have been very subtle for a very, very long time.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
We can photograph craters on the moon, Venus, Mars, pick your planet. But every UFO sighting is just blurry.
Yeah. That's true. Well, I mean, they're moving faster than light, so the camera can't pick it up, right? That's what.
Like some UFOs, I could see being like military technology from maybe an agency, our authorities don't know about, or from another country. Even I'll go to that well before I ever go to, a completely intelligent life form that traveled light years away. There's just the odds of there being life out there and the odds of there being life capable of doing everything that we think these UFOs are doing. Those are two totally different things, and people confuse them a lot. So I'm definitely going to go to maybe China or maybe the USA testing something out long before I go to aliens.
I mean, a lot of the time they're just weather balloons.
Yeah,
it's like weather balloons like 95% of the time or something ridiculous. But
not only that, but I was
go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Travis. Sorry.
I feel like the term UFO, like Occam's razor, is there. It's an acronym for unidentified flying object. It's just something you saw, and at the time you didn't know what it was. That's all it is. UFO does not have to immediately mean flying saucer. Aliens. It can just mean you saw something and didn't know what it was. In the Navy, we see crap you get mighty loopy. You get underway in the ocean and just left nothing with your thoughts long enough. You see shit that you just...
Yeah. I mean, hell, honestly, I was a bit dehydrated today. After my run, I looked up and I saw bright white spots in the sky very consistently.
Right.
And, that was a UFO to me. I saw a bunch of bright white spots.
Right.
They're up there. They're up in the sky. Look, I see it flying around. I'm following it with my eyes, But I knew that, oh, hey, I need to sit down for a minute.
Yes.
Not that there was an alien.
Right, exactly.
So what are these videos? Are these the ones they've been around for a little while now, right?
Well, so I think that this in part resurfaced because of the pyramid UFO video that recently came out.
Yeah, the flashing light one, right?
Yes.
Well, the DoD had declassified several reports or studies or information that had to do with UFOs. And, conspiracy theories always have to align something to do with the government. So anytime the government releases anything that just has the name UFO in it. Like here's just some random papers that we have on UFO. It's real. It's real. This is what we've been waiting for. It's real. And that's yeah.
They've been
I have to say, I'm
decades.
still bitter that Trump didn't release the JFK files because I was so excited.
Oh my God.
For most of the conspiracies to be absolutely crushed immediely when all of the data came out.
You just see Trump looking at it. He's like, my God. He has like the only adult moment in his life. He's like, we can't release this.
No, he still wanted to. Somebody, like one of the 3-letter agencies convinced him that there were still, sources and methods that couldn't be released. Right? But I was like, just do it. Come on. Just do it. I need this.
Mean torture, enhanced interrogation. Like, no, we can't release this.
We can't release that. We'll make America look bad. The one time Trump wasn't a child is the one time we wanted him to be. To the UFO point, Obama had said, and this is quote here, what is true about UFOs, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so, I think that people still seriously trying to investigate and figure out what it is. So still can't.
Obama, he's always like fair. Even.
Yeah.
Whoa, did you just say Obama was fair? I mean, that's a pretty radical liberal position.
Mateo, you have to turn in your Republican card now. I'm sorry.
I did that a while ago because of Trump.
I know. But
me too. Well, it was before Trump for me.
I mean, technically, I never even voted for a Republican president.
I think I did. I think I voted. I think I voted for in 08.
I'll turn in my my
rad
card.
Obama? Ooh.
What? No, I didn't say that.
No, Chase. I think you said.
I think I did. I think I voted for McCain over Obama, but I honestly.
Oh, in 08?
Yeah.
Mm.
I might not have because of Palin, though. So I honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's
Palin and the fundamentals of the economy are stronger. Like the two biggest things I think about McCain, like just ruining himself.
I know in 2012 I made a very interesting decision and voted for Gary Johnson, but.
Look, no. At least domestically, I was okay. Like if a freak event occurred and Gary Johnson got elected, I'd be cool.
He would do like very little harm. He's kind of harmless.
Yes.
And he'd be entertaining as hell.
We'd be able to get high.
We'd still be out of TPP. That's for sure.
That's true.
You'd be like, oh, we can't do this. That's not liberty.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm all for people. Like, I think that people just kind of need to stop assuming that these UFOs are anything other than things that are eminently explicable. I guess is explainable even a word? I don't know, but there's one that was really famous that had like pyramids across the sky. And somebody just last month put out a video. I linked it to you guys if you want to watch it. But he basically proved that if you take a triangle lens and I don't know how to describe it, like the lens shutter, a lot of them are triangular, including on some night vision equipment. And if it's slightly out of focus, it produces this triangular effect on lights that are coming into it. So like then somebody looked at it and said this blinking triangle that's tracking across the sky has the same light pattern as a 737. So it's probably just a 737.
I mean, that's funny.
Having had to look through many a nog in work and training, I can definitely confirm that everything you said is 100% accurate.
Well, then, it does bring in an interesting question though with like this is like the self-centeredness of humanity, right? If there is UFOs out there, of course they're studying us. We're life. We're intelligent. They want to know what
Can you not call them UFOs though? Can you please call them
aliens?
Extraterrestrial life or anything else?
Yes. Their sociologists are so objective they won't come near us. Yeah, in the wild.
Well, they actually follow the Prime Directive, which means they just leave us the fuck alone because that's the only way to actually follow it, right? But yeah, I think like me personally, I don't think in the universe as big as what we have that there isn't reason to disbelieve that there is intelligent life out there, but we haven't any proof that it exists. And so until we have proof it exists, you should remain skeptical.
I mean, I believe that there is certainly life out there. Whether or not there's intelligent life as we understand it,
for sure,
who knows? And the chances of us in our lifetimes ever finding intelligent life in the universe is probably 0. So I just don't worry about it.
Yep. Okay. I mean, Mars is cool and all, but can we just get high-speed rail? And
yes,
like, can we just get that to that point?
Listen,
it's so hard to get.
If I could take an overnight train to go home,
yes,
and it was like anything close to a reasonable price, I would do it every single time. Every time. I love trains. Trains are awesome.
Yes.
Like one upside to the authority of the Chinese government. They just back, no, we're putting these rails right through all of this property.
Dude,
and they make them fast, and it's glorious. The fact that you can get from Beijing to Shanghai in just a few hours, the equivalent of where I am to Colorado.
That's why it's the upside to that type of, authority. Like, it's really going to just revolutionize. Like, that alone is going to make them like a much more advanced economy than us.
Well,
just because of how fast you get people between cities, major cities too. These aren't like.
Oh no! It's for a long time. So for a long time I said, well, China has economies of scale. If you look at their high-speed rail, it's all on the East Coast where all the big cities are. But now they're going way inland.
Yeah.
They've connected Xi'an, which is like way in the middle of the country. They're going to get out to Chengdu. They're getting high-speed rail far inland into China. Imagine if we had high-speed rail connecting DC to the central United States and California to the central United States. That dramatically changes the situation in what we now call flyover states. Because suddenly people have access to them. They could live there. They could commute from there.
It's like landlocked over there. They need that like outlet and inlet.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine what that would do to our politics, because now it isn't these two coastal and then the Southeast corridor. It's, people are more spread out. So it could potentially make you a more diverse society that has more perspectives. I mean, I live in North Dakota, ruby red. I mean, I feel like you can't get any more redder than the state that I'm in now, though I'm in Fargo, which is just mainly diverse. You mentioned Sarah Palin. I moved to the state where like 85% of the people sound just like her as far as speech. They don't think the same way as she does. But the don't you knows and you betchas, which is fairly common in Wisconsin as well. But
I was gonna say people confuse like Wisconsin and Minnesota accent for that.
No, there is a clear difference between the in upper Midwestern states. It's clear.
I will say though, the Dakotas and like Montana, like the Republicans aren't the same in those places as other places. Like Montana is the only state in the country that doesn't have at-will employment. So it's Republican, but it's kind of like, DC is a Democratic stronghold, but yet Muriel Bowser, who's like very, very, very pro-business, is the mayor. Like things aren't always cut and dry.
Well, DC politics in itself is kind of odd. Because Muriel Bowser is actually very unpopular if you actually talk to people like living in DC. She's probably popular amongst people who are sort of implants in DC, but people who have been born and raised the so-called Marion Barry Democrats in DC, none of those people like Muriel Bowser.
Yeah.
None.
I don't know people who like her, and I'm a transplant, but I've lived in the area for a while. But she wins overwhelmingly, like every election.
And it's just because there's a political machine, and essentially when it is your time, when it is your turn in that political machine, you're essentially you are all but certain to become elected. Now there are certain times where that's been disrupted. For example, during the Obama era, you had Adrian Fenty, who was sort of that next in line, and he was very unpopular, and Vincent Gray was able to exploit that. And then it turned out that Vince Gray was incredibly corrupt. So then that sort of, it then went back to the status quo of the machine is going to spit out whoever your mayor is.
Yeah, it feels kind of, I mean, people talk the same way about Chicago, which is how you get somebody like Lori Lightfoot, you know.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who likes Lightfoot. Progressive, liberal.
I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's, I would say Lori Lightfoot is essentially the Vincent Gray minus the crazy corruption, you know, at least for now. But she is the Vincent Gray equivalent of what happened there, because she wasn't what the establishment had tapped to take over as mayor after Roman Manuel. Roman Manuel was just so unpopular. He's like what happened with Adrian Fenty. He wrote on this, he had this momentum, and he was just so incredibly popular that we want to vote for the exact opposite of this mofo, and that just happened to be Lightfoot.
No, I can agree with that. We see that happen a lot in American politics. So yeah.
How did we get here from UFOs? Connor, would
I don't know. This is always the way we go. We meander a little bit.
Duh.
Lightfoot.
She's one of them. She's studying us.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about the lizard people. I mean, we should cover that sometime. Which obviously,
Lord,
important topics.
I mean, if I want to learn about the lizard people, I'm going to watch the classic sci-fi series V, because that's all it is, repackaged, resurfaced. But I think we should go on to another topic while everybody is still on and consonant. What do you guys think? Do you guys want to cover the continual downgrade of the GOP in the House, or should we cover the most recent developments in the most recent Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
I guess out of interest for me, I'd go with the Palestinian conflict. There isn't a whole lot. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the GOP.
The news changed a lot today.
Yeah. I mean, finally a ceasefire agreement was agreed upon. So there's good thing there. It's just that, you know, we're kind of in Groundhog Day effect, because
of course,
even though, yes, this happened, but it was inevitable there was going to be a ceasefire.
Oh yeah.
So it's just where is the ball going to move in a microscopic way? One thing that it is worth pointing out is that we at least have an Overton window shift, in that advocating in any way or empathizing with Palestinians is no longer considered political suicide anymore, which I'd say is a plus. It's just, I wish it didn't take the two-state solution to become basically unviable now for that to happen, because now we have the only plausible reality is for this to work is to have a one-state solution where Palestinians have the same rights and recognitions as Jewish citizens. The problem is that completely runs afoul of Zionism and the goal of Zionism. So that's already absolutely going to be non-starter. I had actually sort of jumped on Bernie Sanders about this, because during an interview during the presidential primary, he was interviewed by someone at Al Jazeera English, and he was asked about the one-state solution of, hey, why don't we just give Palestinians and Arabs the same rights and same access as Jewish citizens living in Israel? And then he just literally parroted out, I don't agree with that, because then it would fail to be a Jewish state. In other words, Zionism.
Yeah. There's a huge issue within American politics, specifically of linking all Jewish people to Zionism. I've experienced this in multiple fronts when arguing with people online, because I don't take like a huge firm anti-Zionist stance where somebody would assume that I'm just being anti-Semitic, right? I try to take a more nuanced position, like I focus on the settlements and that sort of thing, right? but then there's a bunch of people that have like told me directly, people from either Israel or very conservative people that are like, well, 90% of Jewish people worldwide support Zionism, so if you don't support Zionism, then you're anti-Semitic. Like that's basically where their argument goes. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that not only that, but Zionism is also a moving target. It doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. So to the center left and the left, right, in Israel, Zionism to them means a Jewish state. It doesn't have to be the entire territory, just at least some bit of land that is ours.
Yes.
And then on the right, it is this entire block should be ours and should only be Jewish. Period. There is no other people that should be here but us. So again, that's another issue, which is Zionism doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. So,
Yeah, it's this is like a frustrating thing to talk about, because if you look at the reasoning, like why Israel was created, it was because Jews for hundreds of years, maybe thousands, whatever, Jews have faced persecution for a really, really, really long time. And a huge reason that Israel exists is that Jews, if and when they are persecuted, have a place where they can go. And that's the concept of the right of return, right? So that people can return to Israel. They can go there. They can, go there and have a place to be safe if there's persecution. If suddenly Jewish people are being persecuted in Hungary, they have a state that they can go to. And that is important. And like, I understand that. But if you're just going to make it not a multicultural state, but an ethno state, then you're not creating something that is good for the Jewish people or good for humanity. And the stated policies of Israel under the Netanyahu administration are that Palestine cannot be allowed to have a state, and Palestinians cannot be given equal rights under Israeli law. So there's not only no chance for a one-state solution under this administration, there's no chance for a two-state solution under this administration. There is only effectively option of apartheid or genocide. Those are the two options under this administration. If there's going to be any progress made on this, Netanyahu absolutely has to go. But I don't know if or when that's going to happen.
I was just going to say, I don't know if it's just Netanyahu. The Likud party has a conservative coalition with the right-wingers, and Netanyahu's very much. There's a fantastic PBS documentary called Netanyahu at War. I think it's a two-parter. Everyone should absolutely check it out. It explores his life and puts his life into the context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So it's fantastic. But according to him, there's already been a two-state solution. It's called Jordan. And that's where all the, he calls them Arabs, should move, is if they don't like Israel, they should all go to Palestine, or they all should go to Jordan. So that's his compromise, and that's what he believes. But yeah, go ahead, Travis.
I was going to say, I'm going to check that out. Also, definitely a good read is Peled, the son of a general. The life of a Israeli living in Palestine. So Peled is, I forget his first name, but he's actually a well-known critic who is Jewish, who is Israeli, and his father was one of the four people that founded Israel as a settlement, as a country after the war, and he gives a lot of insight. And points out a lot of things inherent to Jewish culture that you wouldn't have known unless you were there or living amongst them, because there's a lot of misconceptions. The first thing is the irony. So Chase, you pointed out that the original goal was to have a safe place to stay. The irony is you have two sects of Israelis that live in Israel. So the Zionists, even though they cite religion as the reason, as the prime motivation for why they believe that expansion, it is their right by God to expand in the territory, none of them are religious. It's actually one of the reasons that in the beginning, when Israel was established as a country, it was completely opposed by the Jewish Orthodox community in America, because none of the original founders of the colony were actually practicing Jews. They didn't observe the Sabbath. They didn't do any of that. What eventually happened was when they began to expand settlements and take over land that was sacred to Jewish people, they had used that to eventually rule over to win over the Jewish Orthodox community. So that's why you can find people in the Jewish Orthodox community that don't support Israel, that don't support the government at all, despite the fact that they were Jewish. As far as Netanyahu and why he's able to win, it's kind of the quirk with a parliamentary system, right? It's the irony, because a lot of people in America would say, I wish we were more parliamentary like, but unfortunately there is almost a two-party dynamic in a parliamentary system itself, because the exact same thing has happened in UK, whereas
India too.
Yes. Whereas in Israel, the Likud party, which is essentially the equivalent of Republicans in America or the Tories in UK, they had lost power. They simply just allied themselves with the further right, which in effect pushed them further right. It's the same thing that happened in UK, where Labour was threatening to remove the power from the Tories. So the Tories had begun reaching out to further left, more fringe parties like UKIP, to grow their power, which then pushed their party more to the left. And that's essentially what has happened in Israel and what has happened in a number of countries in Europe.
No, that's a very good point. To kind of bring this back onto what is currently happening in this context, there has been massive bombings of Palestine, right? And although there has been an agreed ceasefire, has that gone? Chase, do you know if that has gone into effect? The
last article I read before I hopped on this call was that it was going into effect like immediately.
Okay, because
but I didn't have time to dig into all of it.
The problem is while it's technically in effect, but unfortunately, things take a while to actually reach the troops. So from an operational standpoint, there's supposed to be a ceasefire. But if there was any sort of tactical strikes that were ordered before the ceasefire came into pass, best believe those tactical strikes are unfortunately going to be carried out.
And that's what I was.
The IDF tends to be very. The IDF doesn't make mistakes, which is why I was so shocked when they blew up a building that had the Associated Press in it. Mm-hmm. Like they knew that the Associated Press was in there, and they blew up that building anyway, which is really, really shocking. Mm-hmm. But if a ceasefire is signed, then I don't think the IDF is going to keep doing stuff.
Well, to that point, so Senpai Chow just said on Twitch here that the ceasefire is supposed to go in effect on Friday. I don't know if that means Friday our time or Friday their time. They're already into Friday now. Yeah. Last thing I heard was 2 a.m. their local time. So I'm not entirely sure if that has come to pass or not.
Apparently, as of 8 minutes ago, so there's a 2 a.m. time. Hamas has confirmed it. Israel has not yet confirmed the 2 a.m. time.
Okay, so that's where I had heard that then. But what I've understood to have happened in the past, and this makes a lot of sense from a tactical standpoint, I decided to say, is that the IDF will ramp up strikes right before the ceasefire is supposed to go into effect. Yes. And the reason being is that they're trying to further diminish
the grass.
Yeah. Yes. Motivate. Yes.
Motivate.
Yeah. That's literally what they call it.
Yeah, that's as shitty as it is to say that. That's what they, like Travis said, that's what they call it. And it's to take out targets that they might not otherwise be able to take out during a time where people are like, oh, it's just more tensions, whatever, right? And so I'm not sure how well the ceasefire will hold if that goes into effect, because the Hamas has basically said, fuck you, we're not going to abide by that this time. And you've already had millions upon millions of dollars of damage in Gaza. We're talking like, what is it, like 2 mile strip basically of.
Yeah, I don't think people really appreciate this, but so that AP building got blown up, this apartment building got blown up.
Yeah.
This is the most densely populated part of the planet. You're talking about apartment buildings with a 2-bedroom apartment with a family of 10 in it. Like that's the kind of thing you're talking about. So when you destroy that apartment building, you're doing whatever, $100,000 worth of damage, but you're displacing thousands of people.
Yep.
Thousands of people who have literally nowhere to go. Even if they wanted to leave the Gaza Strip, they can't. They are trapped in there. There is nowhere for them to go. So 200 some Palestinians died, 12 Israelis died. All deaths are tragic. I think we can all agree on that. But you know what? Ceasefire is going to go into effect. Things are going to feel pretty normal in Israel. Palestine's going to continue to be subjected to violence, even if there's a ceasefire. And I think it's important to recognize that reality.
100%. 100% agree with you. Like we need to realize, like, this is why I'm so much against settlements, because it sets up the ability to do these things, because you're saying you have the right to defend yourself. But while you're defending yourself, you're having people go in, taking over these houses that are displacing other people, ratcheting up tensions, like very understandably so. I'm not like diminishing it here or nothing like that. Ratcheting up tensions, ratcheting up pushing more and more people into an effective ghetto. And like Chase said, nowhere else to go unless they want to become refugees in one of the 5 or 6 Arab states that are around where they don't get rights at all. Either they're not allowed to integrate, they're not allowed to have jobs. They're basically forced to live in squalor, even within these, no matter how many years these refugees have been living there. That's why you have there's like 1 million or
just
2
to
million.
be clear, if you're in the Gaza Strip, that's not even an option.
I was going to say,
you can't leave because the borders are closed.
Oh, that's true. So, that too. Sorry, that wasn't me being clear. Thank you for the clarity, man. So exactly, and so
even that bad, horrible option isn't available to you.
Is not open. And when we talk about the right of return, the Jewish people having the right to return, that same courtesy is not being extended to Palestinians who have been displaced through multiple wars and are living still on refugee camps with families that they've had since becoming refugees. Like 1 million or 2 million people plus. And so
there are, if you count the refugees and their offspring, there are 7 million outside of Palestine.
And not only that, it's just a big gaslight, right? Because Hamas, the argument is, well, we would negotiate peace, but Hamas doesn't want peace. But the thing
is true.
Well, but the thing is they're not the sole authority. You also have Fatah or the PLO, right, in the West Bank. But the problem is, and this is how the gaslight works: is not all Palestinians are supported by Hamas, are governed by Hamas, or support Hamas. But what Hamas argues is, okay, but look at the other authority that's trying to have these peace talks. They've had peace talks for 5 decades now, and they have less land, they have less rights, they have less things. At least we are actually putting up a fight. Granted, life sucks in Gaza, but this patch of dirt is still ours. They don't come up in here. They don't come up in here dictating us. We can't do anything outside of Gaza, but at least this patch of dirt is ours, and at least we were able to successfully defend it. Meanwhile, Fatah, which was originally the PLO, the Liberation Army that fought to try and liberate Palestinians, they're neutered. They kowtow to Netanyahu, and all that you're getting out of it is bulldoze homes. Yeah. So
it's frustrating. The discourse around this topic is bad. I want to note while we're talking about this that the U.S., we talk about this, we go talk about all the things. I always try to make sure that I am being fair to Israel, who has all of the power and, is doing the settlements and all that. But still, I try to acknowledge, like, why Jewish oppression. Like, I try to do all of that, right? But the U.S. at this point is absolutely complicit in the situation in Israel and Palestine. We give Israel billions of dollars a year that they do not need. They have the 3rd strongest military in the world. They don't need our money. This is a national security issue for the United States. People aren't talking about it, but there is no dissociating the imagery of IDF forces going into the third holiest site in the Muslim world. And then Israeli local officials celebrating and dancing, watching this happening, and saying that people should have been shot in the head for protesting.
Yeah.
That imagery is going to breed people who are going to work against the national security interests of the United States. We are not seen as any kind of neutral arbiter. We are clearly backing Israel. We're giving them all kinds of money. That also has to stop if we have any way of going forward. Oh, and by the way, just so we're clear on which party has actually done more to help build up the defenses of Israel, Iron Dome was paid for by the Obama administration.
Man, it is really, really an issue. I agree that the one-state solution or the two-state solution is effectively dead. I don't think it was much viable in the first place, given the territory that they were talking about being a two-state solution. There wasn't a continuous border, so you had ethnic enclaves. There wasn't access to the sea, so you didn't have a vibrant ability to have a port city. Water would have been an issue eventually between the two states if you had it completely cut off. I would really wish to see the U.S. simply not give money anymore. But at the same time, while saying that, I recognize that that's what the hardline Israelis want too, because they feel like the U.S. puts enough restraint on them that they can't go 100% to where they want. So I don't know. It's pretty bad.
There's also sort of the glib confidence of the 6-day war, because you point out the what happened at the mosque. Third, like you pointed out, third most important holy site in the religion of Islam. But the reason why that doesn't worry them about any retaliation is because people are like, well, the last time the Arab world united to try and fight us, we won. That was the 6-day war. But they leave out the fact that there was a big old nation to the west that helped them win that battle. So
yeah.
And also pan-Arabism is over now. The Palestinians are like on their own.
Yeah.
Well,
the Arab world is so allied with Israel now that scenario is not even like Israel's got almost nothing to worry about. And that's not good, actually.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because tons of people on the right in the US are saying, oh, the Abraham Accords, all of these, Gulf countries and Arab states made peace with Israel, normalized relations. That actually probably made the Palestinian-Israeli conflict worse. Because it used to be the Palestinians at least were like, oh, well, all these other countries got our back. But who has their back now?
I would argue they never really had the Palestinians back to begin with. It was just so the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's the whole mantra that they live by. If you look at all of the members who joined on the Arab Accord, they are the Sunni Gulf states. And if there's anybody that the Sunni Arab world hates more than Israel, it is Iran or any Shiite existence. So the reason why Mohammed bin Salman MBS was so keen on switching his position from being anti-Israel to pro-Israel and joining the Abraham Accords is because he wanted to make sure this was his best chance to have a decisive stance over Iran. Trump had dissolved the deal, and now if he just swallowed the pill and joined Israel, then that would gain favor to say, okay, when are we going to go after Iran? Or more specifically, when is the United States going to go after Iran? Because Saudi Arabia the thing about them is they don't like fighting wars directly. The whole reason why there is a terror network on either side, where they're on the Sunni side, whether you're talking about ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, Nusra al-Sharia, or on the Shiite side, whether you're talking about Hezbollah, Quds Force, blah, 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 is they are just fighting this big proxy war over whose version of Islam is better than the other. And if we're actually going to achieve any sort of peace in the Middle East, what the United States have to do is no longer take sides into this. You can't take Saudi Arabia's side. You can't take Iran's side. And you would have to seat these two at the table and negotiate a peace agreement between these two. Until you do that, everything, including the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is just cursory.
With that, I think one of the things that could become positive out of it, and it would piss everyone off, is if Biden opened up a Palestinian consulate inside the consulate in Jerusalem.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
That's what should happen, right? Like, but it's
getting that from someone from his generation.
Exactly. But as soon as Trump is like, we're doing it now, I'm like, then the next guy needs to just make it also a Palestinian one. No one's going to want to bomb it, because then both sides are going to be like, say, fuck this. And then it will try to create some semblance of having to work together, because they're going to have to interact in the same building. So that would be my ideal one-off just pick for that. So
I dig it.
I am to your point, Travis. I have never, ever, ever felt a shred of optimism on this subject. But the fact that so many people in a relatively short time are just aware and empathetic to the plight of the Palestinian people, maybe we've got a shot at making some progress in the next couple of years.
I'm kind of in that. That's the thing I'm hanging on to. That's the thing I'm hanging on to. Because if anybody, so it went viral. Geraldo Rivera on Fox News. So you've got to watch it.
Well, I have not seen a viral Geraldo clip, and I'm sad that I missed it.
It is one for the ages, because he basically went on a tirade talking about how Gaza is an apartheid state, how they have no running water, how the electricity is run by the government. Is run by Israel. The gas is run by Israel. There is no. Of course, these are obvious facts, but people
don't know them though.
Yes, but for a regular commentator on Fox News to point this out and have a heated debate, because usually it's just coming from a left-wing commentator that they would bring on and then just kind of talk him down. But this is their own. Yeah. So to have their own guy that was just spitting facts at another Fox commentator, it was shocking. And like I said, this had went viral.
Further proof of Fox News' slip to the left.
That's right. So
this is the video, right?
No, this isn't it.
To the side Ted of Cruz? The squad against.
What did Cruz say?
No, this is it.
This is it. Yeah.
Let me just skip forward a little bit.
Yeah. You're right at the point.
Significant de-escalation in all of this.
So we're going to watch this
today.
I hope Twitch doesn't take us down.
In a moment, retired Four-Star General Jack Keane joins us with his strategic analysis of what is going on right now. But first, discussion with Katie Pavlich, townhall.com news editor and Fox News contributor, and Geraldo Rivera, Fox News correspondent.
You guys can hear it, right?
Great to have both of you with us today. Geraldo, it sounds like you are sympathetic to Tlaib's argument here.
I am indeed, Martha. I think that people have to recognize what Gaza Strip is. It's one of the most menacing, melancholy places on earth that I've ever reported from. It's a 20-mile long strip of desert by the sea. 2 million Palestinians trapped inside by a brutal blockade enforced by Egypt in the southwest, Israel, every place else. It's a crowded cesspool, highest unemployment on earth, over 50%. Everyone and everything going into and out of Gaza is controlled by Israel. Electricity, fuel, airspace, ports, cell phone service, even who gets to farm those meager fields they have. It's effectively one of the world's largest prison camps, and it's being bombed with bombs supplied by the United States of America. It's outrageous that we gave Israel these hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons without insisting on a ceasefire now. Why not a ceasefire now?
Holy shit.
Wow.
Geraldo.
It gets better. It gets better.
We'll continue to watch this because I think it's very important, and it's only got like a couple of minutes left in it. I do want to state that over 50, I think it's close to or just over 50% of Palestinians are under the age of 40. The vast majority of Palestinians are of prime working age youth people, our generation, millennials and Zoomers. And so when you say over 50% of unemployment, you're talking about the most productive years of a person's life being ripped away from them without their own input, essentially, without their ability to actually control it. And so mentioning that with this is very important. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, just recognizing that reality, if you want to talk about like what breeds conflict and what breeds terrorism,
that
lack of economic opportunity, lack of food, the fact that we don't see consistent large scale uprisings in the Gaza Strip is like shocking.
Yeah.
Like we would expect any other peoples like to be in open revolt consistently based on the living conditions that they are subjected to, not by choice, but by force.
I mean, from a sociological standpoint, anytime you have that, like you said, a median age of 30 and 40, your prime productive years, with that unemployment, you use historically that always leads to essentially a failed state. Somalia is actually the best example of that, being close to that region where we once our primary thing that we had to combat over there were the pirates. And one of the things that has happened is the piracy committed by Al-Shabaab is actually at an all-time low. And part of that was because all we did was we threw some money at some NGOs along with the Somali government, and they literally just gave people jobs and land to farm. And just by doing that, just by giving them something to do, that reduced the amount of piracy around the port of Aden by something like 80%. So yeah, you're definitely right when it comes to what breeds from that kind of situation.
Facts.
All right, let's get some more mustache.
Yeah, going back to the video, just have to click on, nope, not that button. There it is. And then play.
Katie, what about the money that has gone to the Iranian-backed Hamas? I mean, that they're U.S.
Oh, Iran backs Hamas. Ooh, QQ.
dollars in those rockets that are flying towards Israel as well.
Well, first, I think it's important to go back in history for a moment and remind everybody that the Israelis gave the Palestinians the Gaza Strip in return for peace. And the only thing they've received since then are rockets, terrorist attacks, and kidnappings of innocent Israeli citizens. They also, when they made that deal, gave them a number of greenhouses, which the Palestinians then burned. And that's why they don't have farming resources in the Gaza Strip. But going to the current situation, Geraldo asked the question about why not demand a ceasefire now. To ask for a ceasefire from the Israelis at this point in time, because Hamas rockets are continuing to be fired, is essentially asking the Israelis to stop defending themselves from terrorist attacks. It is Hamas who is firing on aid convoys trying to get into Gaza, not the Israelis at this time. And then the bigger question, Martha, what you're asking is, will—
I can pause it. What's up?
It's like, oh, we gave you some sand in a garden and no legal rights. Why aren't you happy? Why aren't you happy? You've got your sand. You've got your garden. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. We've done everything we can.
My God. Yeah, they don't care. That's what it boils down to, because the type of people that are going to be commentating of this on Fox News in support of Israel are going to be a majority of them Christian Zionist, and they just want all the Jews to control all of historic Israel, because then it can summon Jesus.
I can get to heaven. I can get to heaven.
Exactly.
They're chosen people. As long as they happy, my ass get to heaven. That's pretty much
exactly.
How it goes.
No, fucking 100% facts, and I can't stand it. I question what I'm not going to say it. we'll talk about that off air.
President Biden side with the left side of his party. And he already has, effectively, because of these negotiations that are ongoing in Vienna. And the Israelis can't afford a ceasefire right now. Hamas still has thousands of rockets that they can fire. Israel's facing this threat from the north from Hezbollah. They're also facing this threat from the West Bank. And they're being used in two proxy wars, one from Iran and one between Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas, who are fighting for credibility and power in the West Bank. So at this point in time, Israel's doing what it can to defend its citizens, and asking for a ceasefire before Hamas has stopped is effectively saying we're willing to let Israeli lives be spent on behalf of a terrorist organization.
I mean, Geraldo, Israel is a tiny country that's surrounded by people who want it to not exist.
That's not true anymore.
We have always had, Israel's always been our ally in this world. We have worked over the past 4 years. Just let me finish one more thing. To find a way to create more allies for Israel in the Middle East. We saw the Abraham Accords. We saw some really promising developments to try to strengthen their position and to promote peace in the Middle East. And now we are, 5 months now into the Biden administration, and here's what we see. It's impossible not to see some.
My God.
So he says he's a Zionist, and what does he expect? I mean, if it's like he's playing both sides. It's like, I'm a Zionist, but it's so bad that they're.
This is why I said
with Zionism.
This is what I tried to acknowledge before about having a homeland for the Jewish people to escape persecution. I think that's
right
context.
And this goes back to what I said about the word Zionism being a moving target. To some people, it just means a Jewish state. And then some people say that it means not having a Jewish state with no other Palestinian state next to it. And that,
a lot of them don't even realize like what kind of maintenance is needed for it to stay a Jewish state. Like, it should be a Jewish state. It's like, it sounds so great until you realize you have to physically keep it Jewish. Like, that's just straight ethnostatism 101.
Yeah, it's fascism. It is.
Like, it's just close as you can get to it. And it's like, I don't know why so many people in America have trouble like saying like, I don't support Israel. It's just dumb.
I mean, this is.
Oh, I thought Anthony froze.
No, I'm sorry.
The number one talking point on this entire thing is Israel has a right to defend itself. But destroying an apartment building, not defending yourself. Imposing your will on the Palestinians isn't defending yourself. Limiting their rights isn't defending yourself. Every state has a right to defend itself. That's meaningless in this context. It literally doesn't even apply. Israel is more than capable of defending itself. That's not even part of the discussion. I don't even understand. Like, when the Biden administration put out that statement, I was like, well, I'm glad to see that nothing has changed. I was very disappointed.
Classic boomers.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's why Supreme Court justices need to retire.
Got him. Do you guys want to finish this clip? It's got. What does it got?
Like I said, he does
fast forward to the good parts.
Geraldo, well, not at this point, because Geraldo's rebuttal is, despite that, caveat that he laid there, it is a fairly good comeback.
I mean, she did deliver a heavy blow with the greenhouse statement. That was brutal.
Yeah, when she said the greenhouse, I was like, where are you going with that?
It was like, it's not contradicting anything.
The idea that a couple greenhouses is like enough to feed millions of people is like.
You know what that was?
So
he's like the few fields they're allowed to farm. She's like, oh well, they had greenhouses. Like, she really just thought that was like a great comeback or contradiction.
Uprooted 500, 600-year-old olive groves that were like sustaining people for hundreds of years.
Greenhouses, boom.
Yeah, greenhouses, right? They could just replant them in greenhouses. Shut the fuck up.
People don't know this, but like. In some cases, people were planting olive trees. Olive trees take 25 to 35 years to fruit. Yeah. You plant olive trees so your grandchildren can have a source of income.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Israel has more than once gone in and bulldozed olive trees in the name of, settlements and expansion. It's abhorrent. Like, you can't defend that. Like, Israel, a homeland for the Jewish people. Fine. I have nothing to say about it. But criticizing those things doesn't make you anti-Semitic against a human.
We have a comment coming in from one of our community members, Brad Walker, talking about an innocent Jewish person being attacked by some Antifa pro-Palestinian group, I think in California. I don't
doubt it.
I have not seen this. I have no idea what it's about. I'm not ignoring it. I just don't know what the context is. This is the first time I'm hearing of it. But this is kind of in a rebuttal to some of the stuff that we're talking about. I think specifically because it seems like we're being one-sided to him. I don't know exactly what other side that you want us to take, considering
okay, I'll just say, let's assume that exactly what you just said is true. A pro-Palestinian group attacks some Jewish people in California. That has absolutely no relevance to what we're talking about, A. And B, those people should be prosecuted and thrown in jail.
Done. Simple.
No, facts. And he's saying that he gave us these links, but I think something's preventing those links from getting to StreamYard, our StreamYard chat. So I'm not discounting them. I just didn't get them. And so I can comment that on later offline with you if you want. But I just don't want any issues being caused by this just because I don't know what you're talking about.
So I found an article about it, but I do not see how people attacking somebody in California has any relevance to the actions of the state of Israel on the Palestinians. And to be fair, Hamas, which is a terrorist organization that has called for the destruction of Israel. I'm not a Hamas fan. I don't think anyone here is a Hamas fan.
Yeah, so, Hamas can get fucked, honestly.
I've always taken the position of you have to stop giving them a reason to support Hamas.
There you go.
And you're just helping them do it, because you look at what Fatah has achieved, the PLO with Abbas, which it's funny that Abbas still gets attacked. What functionally has Abbas done other than show that he can't really take any support away from Gaza? They are effectively at a political détente. Gaza can't encroach upon the West or East Bank, and the West and East Bank cannot encroach upon Gaza. At what point they entertained the idea of making a unity party between the two, but that just made it harder for negotiations, because then under Netanyahu, the Israeli government was going to say, "See, now you're part of Hamas." Now they can argue that if Fatah unifies with Hamas, then the argument that all Palestinians support Hamas is complete. So
it's a no-win situation in that regard. But to be clear, and I don't think I don't know how any clearer I can be, Hamas can go fuck themselves. They're not helping their cause.
Correct.
While I understand why Hamas exists as an entity, it does not mean that I support the bombing of random civilians. If they acted like the IRA back before the Troubles existed, so back in I want to say the 70s, where they only
was it random though?
The
building, wasn't that something Hamas was using?
No. I'm talking about Hamas, just Hamas's rocket attacks, not Israel retaliating against Hamas.
Okay.
So
I was about to say.
Yeah. No, I got where the confusion is. If they were only targeting legitimate targets instead of just sending random rockets over, there would be more of an argument to make that Hamas is doing an actual liberation fighting, but they're not doing that. They're they're actively engaged in terrorism, so they can go fuck themselves.
And also, to be clear, a majority of Palestinians
do not like Hamas either.
Do not like Hamas.
Yeah.
So saying Hamas bad does not mean all Palestinians are bad.
Right.
And does not mean that Palestinians deserve to have their homes destroyed in the name of, combating Hamas. What's crazy to me is that normally for any military in the world, when there's children or news organizations that are going to be collateral damage, they don't fucking do the strike.
It's the Geneva Convention.
Israel has no problem blowing up a building and killing dozens, hundreds of people.
And that's the rub,
it's
right?
Literally in the Geneva Convention not to do
it. Is a war crime.
So Hamas can get fucked. But you know what? Hamas basically has no power to do anything. They aren't popular in Palestine. They are militarily ineffective. They are extremist, and they benefit from ongoing conflict. Yes. So you know who else does? The Netanyahu government.
There you go. So I to Brad, I hope that clarified our position here and why we're taking the positions that we are. If it's not, we can have a conversation, you and I. We can also have it with anybody else on the cast if you'd like, if we can set that up. So I want to get back over to, do you guys want to continue to watch the final parts of this video? All right.
I'm all like amped, and now Brad's got me all hot.
Re-enter a deal with Iran at play here.
We have dozens of Palestinian children who have been killed in the last week with American bombs. I have no proposed solution to this conflict. I have no proposed solution. Better minds than mine. Maybe General Jack Keane can help. And floundered, frustrated by this complexity. I know this, though, Martha, and I want our audience to, the fact that the United States of America is providing Israel many of the weapons Israel's using today to kill Palestinian civilians without even demanding a ceasefire. Tlaib is right. That makes us complicit in an ongoing crime against humanity.
Katie, last thought.
Geraldo, that is such a dishonest argument to make to accuse the Israelis and the Americans of deliberate.
That's the remainder. But yeah, that's I was already shocked at the initial, but then his
he was actually he's legitimately was getting emotional with his argument. You can hear it in his voice, and so. I think what we said when we started this segment, I think it was Chase saying that the Overton window has shifted, or was that you, Travis, that said that?
No, it was Chase. I guess both of us, but
Travis said it. I reinforced.
All right. So both of you said with the Overton window shifting, I think that is 100% a great example of that Overton window shifting. And while it isn't a huge amount of progress, that's going to change how American politics tackles this issue going forward.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. Does anybody have any good news to talk about? We've been streaming for about 2 hours. It's about when we cut it. So I'd like to hopefully end on a happy note. The only thing that I can think of is that we are still vaccinating a decent amount of people at a good pace, and the Biden administration has agreed to. While demand for vaccines in the United States continues to drop, sharing those excess vaccines with poorer countries is a good development, especially for Africa.
And supporting a temporary waiver of the patent protection so that countries can manufacture their own vaccine. That's huge.
Was it huge. Before last week that the mask guidance got lifted? Or I think that was just this week, wasn't it?
It was this week. It happened. It either happened like on Friday or like Monday or Tuesday. So it was since our last
I just have to say that was like, I don't know if I could be more excited about something happening. And then I listened to an interview on Pod Save the World or Pod Save America with Fauci, where he talked about the reasoning and the underlying data for why the CDC made the decision to lift that mask suggestion. And it is just suggestions, it's not law.
Yeah, it's not mandatory.
States are following it, and people are following it too. But the efficacy of these vaccines is basically far, far, far exceeding what we even saw in clinical trials. That's what he said. Mm-hmm. And basically, if you are a vaccinated person, even if you're exposed to somebody who has COVID, your chance of even catching it is extremely low, much less having anything serious happening to you is vanishingly low. Mm-hmm. And that is just such good news that I can basically feel complete relief and not have to worry about being out in public and being in a place and drinking a beer and having a good time. And I already have 3 trips planned in the next 2 months. So
nice, dude.
You know what?
Fly tomorrow, man.
I could not be happier about that and what's going on. I'm so happy about it. And God bless Anthony Fauci.
I'll tell you what, timing for my life on that was extraordinary, because I expected life to be in a time warp, because I left or was preparing to leave just as the lockdowns were beginning. And so I was in here a few months, and then was sent to Little Creek, and then was in Africa, and I was there for 10 months, basically, or almost 10 months. And the COVID restrictions were there as well, but when you're there, it was mask up everywhere, and it's you're on a military base, so there's no argument there. 100%. I got back, and then just as I got back was when this news started coming out, and it's just crazy.
Yeah. To Chase's point too, I also have several trips planned up for next month. I get my second vaccine next week, so I'll be going to the beach a couple weeks after that.
I'm going just up the road to Baltimore for my buddy's B-Day next weekend.
I will be not too far. I'll be right in North Bethesda, not too far.
North Bethesda I live in Chevy Chase, so I'm in North Bethesda often.
Right up the road.
Yeah, literally right up the road. Then in like 3 weeks, I'm going to the Jersey Shore, so I will also be at the beach. And then for 4th of July weekend, I'm going to West Virginia. So
get your Guido tan.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll probably just wear SPF.
GTL. That's a Jersey Shore joke, but
Jim Tan laundry, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's what you do after a breakup, right? That's what you do after COVID. Jim Tan laundry.
Pretty much.
Well, everybody, I think that is a wrap for this week's News Roundup. Again, this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on. If you liked what you heard, and we know you did because you stuck with us to the end, go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out, helps propagate it out to the people, and it does help us out. If you want to join our community, we run 2 communities. We run a Discord community where you can join in the links below. And we also run a political debate community on Facebook under groups/Tribune Commons. So go ahead and check that out. Travis Scott, why don't you go ahead and shout yourself out again for our listeners, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Yep. Travis Scott. Also, as you see in parentheses, Raging Tiger, that is my gamer tag. That will also be the name that I will go by on my upcoming stream/podcast, the Tiger Den. So stay tuned for that. That will be premiering on Facebook with clips on YouTube. So I'll be able to get that started imminently. So
look forward to it. What kind of games do you play?
I'm all over the place. Normally I'm a fighting game community guy, so Street Fighter, Tekken, but I also dabble in some MMOs. I'm currently addicted to Phantasy Star Online. Nier Automata just debuted on Game Pass, so I'll be able to catch up on that. I'm slowly making my way to Resident Evil, but I haven't finished 7 yet, so I want to do that before I go messing around with the village and see what all the hoopla is about this 10-foot tall chick that everybody's enamored with. But
Vamp Mommy, make my day, right?
Right.
I know about that.
Something
That's the
Mommy
only thing is a world star.
Right.
What is it exactly?
So in the latest Resident Evil franchise game, there is a villainess by the name of Lady Dimitrescu, and she is apparently this 9.5, 10 feet tall vampire lady that dresses in Victoria level clothes, but because she is thick with a THICC, she's kind of like enamored with the whole gamer community, with the whole "please step on me," kind of.
That's great. I just saw the clip of it. I'm just like,
yes.
That's excellent though.
Yeah, it's the internet has gone hog wild.
Yes.
I just have to say, I haven't thought about Phantasy Star Online in so long.
Great game though.
And I played it when it came out on the Dreamcast, and I got like a broadband adapter for my Dreamcast. But that game, I put a lot of hours into that game.
So
I don't know how the modern version is.
So what had eventually happened is PSO2 debuted on the Dreamcast, like before, because in Japan it still had a little bit of life left. It was effectively dead in the States, and there had been a cult following that sustained the game. For some reason, Microsoft then collaborated with Sega to port that effectively almost 20-year-old game to the Xbox and PC, and it has breathed life back into it, and that's where it is.
I'm gonna get on that shit then. But everybody, go ahead and check out Raging Taiga, what he is streaming. Where are you streaming to? Is it Facebook?
Yep, it'll be Facebook Gaming, the Taiga Den. I'll be sure to have links when I go online.
Yep, we'll definitely share those and make sure our community is aware. And as always, everybody, keep your head up through the political storm.